Hi everyone, Ted Wyman here for the Winnipeg Sun, along with hockey writer Scott Billeck on a momentous day in Winnipeg. Patrik Laine, young scoring star for the Winnipeg Jets, has been traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets for center Pierre-Luc Dubois. It does bring back some memories for a lot of Winnipeg fans of the day that Teemu Selanne was traded in 1996 to the Anaheim Ducks. That wasn't a very popular move. How do you think this one's going to sit, Scott?
Well, right now it's not very popular. There's a lot of fans grieving. A lot of fans upset that Patrik Laine is on the move. I mean, this guy was, I remember back in 2016, it was Laine mania. Fans lining up outside of Bell MTS Iceplex to just get a glimpse of this guy, maybe get a picture, an autograph, or anything with him. So it's a tough day. But the difference between now, and 1996 is that the Jets aren't getting, just. And no offense to Ole Tverdovsky or Chad Kilger, but they're not getting kind of a bad package in return. I truly do believe that Pierre-Luc Dubois is a bona fide top line center. He is a top line center. This is the guy that went third overall in the same year that Patrik Laine went second overall. This isn't a bad player. He's not going to score at the same rate as Patrik Laine or at the same ferocity or velocity that Laine has. But here's a player that drives offense, that is very, very good analytically, something that Patrik Laine is not. And he adds to the spine of the team in a way that the Jets have been coveting for a long time now. They've wanted a bona fide second line center. They haven't been able to find one with Brian Little injured. With Jets, Paul Stastny, no offense to him, but he's getting older and he's not going to be the long-term solution here. If the Jets can get a deal done with Dubois, they have Mark Scheifele, Dubois, and potentially Cole Perfetti down the road there as well. So it's a good. I thought the marriage between the two teams to make the trade was a good one, and I think and you listened to Kevin Cheveldayoff as well. I mean, he seemed to say the same thing. Obviously, he's going to be excited about the deal, but I mean, what is your overall reaction from what you heard from the GM and even the players today?
Well, I do think that Kevin Cheveldayoff was dealing with a tough situation because you're talking about a very popular hockey player. I think Patrik Laine had his number 29 as one of the most purchased jerseys at the Jets store over the last 10 years since the Jets came back. Only Dustin Byfuglien and Mark Scheifele were more than him. The people like him in Winnipeg. He's an exciting player. He is a great shooter. He is a straight shooter when he talks, and he's a funny guy. And I think people like his personality. But that didn't necessarily make for a great marriage with this team long term in terms of contract, in terms of whether he really wanted to be here, if he actually liked the situation with his teammates here. And Kevin Cheveldayoff had to be on the lookout to make a deal. He was also dealing from a position of strength. The Jets have quite a lot of wingers, and he wanted a center. So when the chance comes up that Pierre-Luc Dubois is available, he goes for it. Now, I think the price was maybe a little too high. They paid a Patrik Laine, who is a very, very good hockey player in this league, an elite scorer, plus Jack Roslovic, who is a pretty good, he hasn't been great in Winnipeg yet, but he's got the potential. He was a first-round draft pick. And then they only get back a center in Pierre-Luc Dubois and a third-round draft pick. I do think the price was high, and I think we'll have to see whether that works out well for the Jets in the long run.
I will agree with the caveat that the price was high. I think the price was always going to be high for a Laine. Here's a guy who is a generational goal-scoring talent, a guy who's been called a unicorn, a guy that you don't see very often. I mean, the only guy that's on the, at least the ability to shoot like that on that pantheon in the NHL would be Alex Ovechkin, and before him, who knows? I mean, that shot is it's magical, right? I mean, that shot is it's so impressive. Goalies get stuttered with it, whatever. But I also think to get what you want in a trade like this is always going to be difficult. I mean, the fact that some of the deals before this were talking about, like a guy like Brett Pesce in Carolina and maybe somebody else there and whatever. I mean, you weren't going to get the return, but let's not mistake this for, what the Jets felt that they got, at the time for Jacob Trouba, where they got Neil Pionk and a first-round pick that turned into Ville Heinola. Now that trade now looks good, in the end, and I think that's important an important piece here to remember that the result of this trade, whether it's good or bad or even for both sides or whatever it is, won't be known for a year or two or whatever, right? But the Jets now have two bona fide top line centers, and they're going to play 1-2, and that's and then you have options. Does Paul Stastny play on the third line? You leave Adam Lowry there and push Stastny out to the wing right now. But I mean, going forward, and assuming they can get Dubois signed long term, it's one of those things. So the price was maybe steeper, but realize that Jack Roslovic probably was never going to sign here, and he was just waiting to get traded anyways. So
well, sure, but he's worth something too. And actually, I think a lot of people will question why the Jets had to throw something in to make that deal happen. Because Laine, again, is a very dynamic player. Now it's winger for center. And I think you and I would agree, and a lot of people would agree, that a center is a more valuable player in this league in general. But there's also the fact that Laine has been a considerably higher scorer. Far more goals than Pierre-Luc Dubois, and quite a lot of assists, and very dynamic. You saw him in that game against Calgary this year. It was one of his best games he's played here, and he was fantastic. And when he's playing like that, his popularity is through the roof. And that's what I'm saying, is that there's more to this than just what the guy does in terms of stats and whatnot. You're talking about a fan base that wants to support this team and get behind it. And he was one of those figures that they had an opportunity to do it with, a very popular player. And I think it's extremely difficult for the organization, and potentially problematic when you make a move like this. Boy, I'll tell you, Pierre-Luc Dubois is already under pressure to perform, because people are going to question this trade forever.
Of course he is. And I get it. And people are going to look at that last shift by Pierre-Luc Dubois that looked nothing more than a beer league shift from a guy who comes out, once in a blue moon and just floats around the ice and that sort of thing. It was a bad shift, but I don't. And you contrast that to Patrik Laine's last shifts for the Jets, and he scored an OT winner. And I get that part, but you can't really. To me, you don't look at the one shift that he played and the guy. We don't know that situation. We don't know what that turned into. I think a lot of players today, Paul Maurice, Kevin Cheveldayoff mentioned that. I think it's important to realize that, the situations now are kind of moot. I mean, they come here and it's a clean slate. You don't look at those past things, but I think at the end of the day, and you talk about the fans and whatever. At the end of the day, and there is pressure on Pierre-Luc Dubois to come in and perform. But if the Jets win games with Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think that's what covers a multitude of, I don't even want to say sins. It just, that heals things. Winning in the NHL heals things. So if the Jets play better, if they produce more offense, if they win more games because they have Pierre-Luc Dubois, Laine will be forgotten eventually. That's just what happens. So that's where the pressure now lies. Dubois does have pressure come in. He has to help the team win. And this is a town where every move that he makes and every mistake that he makes is going to be amplified, especially when you lose Patrik Laine. But people have to remember, Patrik Laine hasn't always been the best all-around player in the NHL. And I would argue, we're only 2 years removed from his worst season as a player, right?
I mean, it's hard for anybody to argue with you on that point, is what I mean. It's true. He hasn't always been great. He has had stretches of hockey where he really was not good at all.
Yeah, no.
And he was bad in his own zone.
And people wanted him traded. Like fans wanted him traded at one point.
He kind of upped his game, I think, in terms of even a less is more kind of thing. He wasn't scoring as much, but he was better all around. And he did seem to be trending towards becoming a better hockey player. And boy, did he look good in that first game. And I will say this for the picking up Dubois, you talked about having that spine down the middle. Well, if you look at Stanley Cup winners in the last 20 years, how many of them had great 1-2 punches at center ice or even deeper, right? And so you've got Scheifele and Dubois now, but you've also got Paul Stastny here. You've also got Adam Lowry. You've also got Trevor Lewis. You've also got Jansen Harkins. You've got a lot of players. Andrew Kopp. Those guys can all play center. A lot of depth there. And that could be really valuable. Of course, it doesn't necessarily take away the sting, and certainly not right away, of a trade like this. But you're right. In the future, it certainly could work out to be fine.
Yeah, and I think, you just have to let the grieving process play out. It's going to happen. Losing a guy like a Solani or losing a guy like a Patrik Laine is always going to hurt, right? No matter, it wouldn't matter who they got back, I don't think. Unless you get Connor McDavid in return. That's the only guy, there'd be very few guys in this league that the Jets would get in return for Patrik Laine that fans would be like, oh yeah, okay, that's good, right? Like, I mean, it's always going to hurt, and there's a lot of recency bias here. But remember, and Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I remember just watching the Blue Jackets during that 2014 playoff format over the summer. And if you watch Pierre-Luc Dubois, that's going to be a Dubois game, 10 games in those playoffs, he had 4 goals and 6 assists. He was dominant in those games. You read any of the coverage, go back and even watch the games. That's the player he can be. And we also know that Patrik Laine can be the player he was last Thursday against Calgary. It's all going to be about consistency. Is Dubois going to play here? I mean, there are going to be worries that, if the situation doesn't work out, will he quit on the team, right?
Right.
There are, because that's what played out in Columbus. But, it's a clean slate for both teams, for both sides, for both players. And we should include Jack Roslovic in this as well. But, I think, as hard as it is today for a lot of people to kind of come to grips with that, I think you just have to take this as a day at a time, a game at a time, that sort of thing, because we're not going to really know what this trade means to the team, for maybe a year or even 2, or maybe even when Mark Scheifele decides not to re-sign here when his contract over. But Dubois signed a 7-year deal, and now the Jets have a top line center to replace Scheifele, and they also have Cole Perfetti, who's now an established NHL. I mean, these are questions that will be answered down the road. But I think for right now, I mean, let the grieving process play out, but also know that the Jets didn't get hosed in this trade, and I think that is important here. And I sound like I'm defending the team. I'm not. I'm just looking at the two pieces, the two headliners in this deal, and I think the Jets got what they wanted out of this deal. Now, they didn't get a top 4 pairing defenseman in the deal, but they got a top line center. They were never going to get both, right? And so I think they still saved some face when it comes to their offense, and they can figure out their defensive stuff later. I mean, PLD has
They're going to have to.
Yeah, they will. Of course they will, right?
They're gonna have to. And also, Scott, in all honesty, I think it's just a situation where I think for fans right now, go ahead and be sad for not having that player anymore, but be excited for the fact that there is another player coming in here who could make this team better. I think it'll be hard to watch if Patrik Laine goes on to win some Rocket Richard trophies, and there's a very good chance that he will with Columbus. It's hard when you trade good players. These things happen a lot more often in other sports, baseball, the NBA, like crazy. These things do happen. It's just you don't get used to it here. You like your own guys. Anyways, Scott, I think you've done a great job of wrapping that up. I appreciate it. And for Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching Jet Setting.